I'm absolutely a feminist, yes. Feminism is a lens through which one views the world. It's almost like it should permeate one's actions and thoughts. It's not a separate subject. In a way, it's almost difficult to articulate what feminism means to me because it's so ingrained in the way that I operate as a human being that it took me some time to sit down and parse it out. But that's really, I think, I'm glad that that was the case for me, that I had to think about how if I eat a sandwich, how I'm eating a sandwich like a feminist, or if I'm writing about graphic design history, how I'm writing about that like a feminist, or if I'm, grading my students or whatever, like it's an orientation to the rest of the world. I was raised by a single mother who worked very hard to take care of my sister and I. And so I was, I grew up with this model of leadership, this model of here's a woman who takes care of it, takes care of everything, and still manages to be a loving, nurturing, accessible person. My mom is my hero for that reason. I have always believed in equality, and I have always believed in access to opportunity. But having the vocabulary and being able to point to books and being able to articulate things that people have always felt maybe but didn't know how to say, that happened later. That happened in college. If I were to talk about what does feminism mean to me now, I think that makes sense to say because it is different for me now. And I think that this might map onto how feminism has changed as an intellectual discourse, because it was still very white woman dominated when I was in college, and a lot of the things I read were from white women. And I read a lot of intersectional feminism now and feel very committed to that mission, to that cause. So I find myself reading more feminist discourse by women of color and trans women, queer women, finding that has made it a much more expansive inquiry, which has just been great. I mean, there's one of the things we may accidentally fall into when we say feminism is this sort of homogenous presentation of women who are all on the same side. But there's actually been quite a lot of division within feminism, and women experience the world through different embodiments differently. And so I think it's really great to be aligned, but also to respect difference. One of the things you hear sometimes in fields of knowledge and in workplace environment is to be objective and to sort of remove one's personal self, because objectivity is associated with like the sciences, right? A rational process. I really struggle with this term objectivity because I think in many ways objectivity is really only the processes of dominant culture. And every single subject, a person who thinks, is classed, gendered, racialized, nationalized, and sexualized. Every person is marked. It's only dominant culture that is considered capable of transcendence. And I don't believe that that's true. I think when we say be objective or play the game or be, a professional, we are often being asked to be more white and male. The public memories or public monuments or public discourse or public narratives, again, are often nationalistic narratives or the narratives of dominant culture that extend from dominant culture and the way dominant culture views something. And I think it's really important, and this is maybe why I'm getting so interested in this aspect of my scholarship. I really think it's time for more counter narratives to be as present as the dominant narratives. I mean, if you think about public signage, if you think about textbooks in school, if you think about just the official language that dominates a society, it is the voice of a dominant culture. And those narratives can be made more complicated. They can be made more problematized by increased subjectivity, I guess, by having scholars who embrace subjectivity to open those narratives up. So I think when things are like easily packaged, whether that's personality archetypes, racial archetypes, or in binary opposition to each other, it simplifies the whole world, and it makes you, if people identify that way or are conditioned to identify that way, then they're just easier. They're more docile bodies, right? And disrupting binaries makes you less docile. Feminists are working against domination. And there have been a lot of questions about what are the tools for that. Audre Lorde said you can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools, which means you can't fight power with power, or domination with domination, or hate with hate, maybe. And yet there are ways of subverting the system through its forms, through its content, and through its mechanisms that have been effective. I also think there's been problems within the feminist movement by not loving each other enough. Women are socialized to compete against one another. We're socialized to compete for a man's attention. We're socialized to hate each other, to put each other's bodies down, to compete for the same few opportunities available to us. And that has to be a conscious decision to stop. When it comes to shifting dynamics of leadership, what leadership looks like. I think a good leader thinks about that job as a form of service and not as a form of power. But that's not always appreciated in a male-dominated world, right?